It's a simple question. Did a ghost kill the Moore family and the Stillinger girls in Villisca, Iowa? The short answer is no. The long answer is much more complicated. The story of what happened in that small white house is not really about ghosts. It's about us. It's about how we deal with something so terrible, so senseless, that a ghost starts to feel like a better explanation than a human. The story begins in a place you'd never expect such a thing to happen. Villisca, Iowa in 1912. It was a quiet town, a railroad town. People knew their neighbors. They went to church. They believed in hard work and simple lives. The Moore family was a perfect example of this. Josiah Moore was a successful businessman. He owned the local John Deere implement store. He was well known and respected. His wife, Sarah, was active in the community and the church. They had 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. Their ages ranged from 11 down to 5. They were just a normal, happy family. On the evening of June 9th, 1912, the family went to the Presbyterian Church for the Children's Day program. Sarah had organized it. The Moore children all had parts in the performance. It was a big community event. Everyone was there. After the program, 2 of Catherine's friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger, asked if they could spend the night. Their parents said yes. It was a common thing to do. A sleepover after a fun evening. So the Moore family, along with the 2 Stillinger girls, walked home together. It was a short walk. They were probably talking and laughing. No one saw anything strange. No one heard anything unusual. They got home, likely had a snack of milk and cookies, and went to bed. The next morning, a neighbor named Mary Peckham noticed the house was unusually quiet. The Moores were early risers, but the shades were still drawn. The farm animals hadn't been fed. She waited for a while. Still nothing. She tried calling. No answer. Worried, she went over and knocked on the door. Silence. She tried to look in a window, but couldn't see anything. Finally, she called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. Ross arrived with a key. He opened the door and stepped inside. He went upstairs. What he found would haunt the town of Villisca forever. In the master bedroom were the bodies of Josiah and Sarah Moore. They had been bludgeoned to death in their sleep. Ross ran back outside, pale and shaken, and told Mary Peckham to call the sheriff. When law enforcement arrived, they uncovered the full scope of the horror. In the children's room, they found the 4 more children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. They had met the same fate as their parents. In the small downstairs guest room, they found the bodies of the 2 Stillinger girls, Lena and Ina. 8 people, 6 of them children, had been murdered with an axe. The crime scene was bizarre. The killer had taken the time to cover the faces of every victim with clothing or bed sheets. He had also covered every mirror and pane of glass in the house with cloth. An axe, belonging to Josiah Moore, was found in the guest room where the Stillinger girls lay. It was bloody, but had been wiped down. In the kitchen, there was a bowl of bloody water, as if the killer had tried to wash his hands. A 2-pound slab of bacon was leaning against the wall near the axe. A keychain was left on the floor. The doors were locked from the inside. The killer had apparently waited in the house until everyone was asleep, committed the murders, and then let himself out, locking the door behind him. The killer had moved through the house methodically. He started in the master bedroom with Josiah and Sarah. The ceiling above their bed showed gouges from the upswing of the axe. It suggested a powerful, frenzied attack. Then he moved to the children's room. All 4 children were killed in their beds. Finally, he went downstairs to the guest room and killed Lena and Ina Stillinger. The attack on Lena was particularly brutal, suggesting a possible sexual motive, though no definitive evidence of assault was ever found. The killer seemed to have worked in near total darkness, using only the faint light of a kerosene lamp he had brought from downstairs. Its chimney was found under a dresser, the flame extinguished. The town of Villisca was thrown into chaos. Fear and paranoia spread like a virus. People locked their doors for the first time in their lives. They bought guns. Everyone looked at their neighbors with suspicion. Who could do such a thing? The investigation was a mess from the start. Hundreds of people trampled through the crime scene before it was secured, contaminating any potential evidence. The small-town police force was completely overwhelmed. They called in detectives from bigger cities, but the trail was already cold. Over the years, a handful of serious suspects emerged. Each one is a story in themselves. First, there was Frank F. Jones. He was a powerful and wealthy state senator who lived in Villisca. He was also Josiah Moore's former employer and a bitter business rival. Josiah had worked for Jones for years before leaving to open his own, more successful implement store. Jones was reportedly furious. There were also rumors that Josiah was having an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law. The theory was that Jones, too important to do the deed himself, hired a man to kill Josiah Moore. The problem was that the killer didn't stop with Josiah. He killed the entire family and 2 visiting children. This theory suggested the killer was either incompetent or a psychopath who went far beyond his instructions. The man Jones allegedly hired was a man named William Blackie Mansfield. Mansfield was a suspected killer from Illinois. A private detective hired by a burn victim turned investigator named James Wilkerson became convinced Mansfield was the man. Though Wilkerson believed Mansfield was a contract killer and a cocaine addict, he put together a case for a grand jury, and Mansfield was arrested. But the evidence was flimsy. Mansfield had an alibi confirmed by payroll records that he was in Illinois at the time of the murders. The case fell apart, and Mansfield was acquitted. He later sued for false arrest and won a settlement. Then there was Reverend George Kelly. This is perhaps the most compelling and strangest suspect. Kelly was a traveling minister from England. He was known to be eccentric and had a history of mental illness, including periods of peeping and sending obscene letters. He was in Villisca on the night of the murders. He even attended the Children's Day program. He left town on a train in the early hours of the morning on June 10th. Fellow passengers said he was acting strangely, talking to himself and seeming agitated. Years later, while in custody for another offense, Kelly confessed to the Villisca murders. He gave a detailed account, claiming that God had told him to slay and slay utterly. His confession was chilling. But then he recanted it. He went to trial not once but twice. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second time he was acquitted. His defense argued that he was mentally unstable and had been coerced into a false confession. Was he a disturbed man who simply latched onto a famous crime, or was he a cunning killer who used his reputation for insanity to escape justice? We will never know for sure. Another suspect, often favored by modern investigators, is a man named Henry Lee Moore. No relation to the victims. Henry Lee Moore was a serial killer. Just a few months after the Villisca murders, he used an axe to kill his own mother and grandmother in Missouri. A year later, he killed a husband and wife in Colorado, again with an axe. The pattern was eerily similar. He killed entire families in their sleep. The weapon was always an axe. He was eventually caught and convicted for the murder in Missouri. He spent the rest of his life in prison. The timeline and his method make him a very strong possibility. Could he have been passing through Villisca on the railroad and chosen the Moore house at random? It's entirely possible, but there's no concrete evidence placing him in Villisca on that specific night. There were others. A transient named Andy Sawyer was a prime suspect for a time. A railroad crew boss turned him in, saying Sawyer knew details about the murders before they were public knowledge. Sawyer was also found with an axe, but he had a solid alibi. He was in another town at the time of the murders. The sheriff there confirmed it, and Sawyer was released. The investigation failed. No one was ever convicted. The case grew cold. The town of Villisca tried to move on, but the memory of the murders was a permanent scar. The house at 508 East 2nd Street stood as a grim reminder. For decades, it was just a house. People lived in it. They raised families in it. One family lived there for many years without any reported incidents. But the story of the murders never went away. It became local legend, a ghost story told to scare children. And this is where the question changes. The question stops being who killed the Moores and starts becoming what is still in that house. In the 1990s, the house was purchased and restored to its 1912 condition. It was then opened to the public for tours and overnight stays, marketed as a paranormal hotspot. This is the moment the Villisca Axe Murder House was truly born, not just as a historical crime scene, but as one of America's most haunted locations. People came from all over the country, hoping to experience something supernatural. And they did. The reported paranormal activity is extensive. Visitors and paranormal investigators claim to have heard the sounds of children crying or laughing when no one is there. They report hearing footsteps walking across the upstairs floors. Objects are said to move on their own. The door to the children's closet reportedly opens and closes by itself. Many people have captured EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena. These are audio recordings that upon playback seem to contain whispers or voices not heard at the time. Some of the most famous recordings from the house include a child's voice seemingly saying, "Get out," or asking, "What's your name?" People have reported seeing shadow figures darting from room to room. Some feel cold spots, or a heavy, oppressive feeling, especially in the upstairs bedrooms. Some have even claimed to be touched, pushed, or scratched by an unseen force. The stories are numerous and consistent. The house has been featured on countless paranormal television shows, each one adding to its legend. One particular incident solidified the house's dangerous reputation. In 2014, a paranormal investigator staying overnight in the house stabbed himself in the chest. It was a serious, self-inflicted wound. He was rushed to the hospital and survived. He later claimed he did not know why he did it, that some force in the house had compelled him. This event added a new layer of fear to the house's story. It wasn't just a place with sad echoes of the past. It was a place that could be actively malevolent. So, we come back to the original question. Did a ghost kill the Moore family. When you look at the crime itself, the evidence points to a human killer. A ghost cannot swing an axe. A spirit cannot leave a bloody fingerprint on a bedpost or wipe down a weapon. A phantom cannot take the time to cover mirrors or lock a door from the outside with a key. These are physical acts performed by a physical person. The murders were an act of brutal human violence. The crime scene tells a story of a person, or people, filled with rage or madness or both. The killer was made of flesh and blood. He walked into that house, he picked up that axe, and he ended 8 lives. The haunting, if you believe in it, is the result of the murders, not the cause. The house is not haunted by the thing that killed the Moores. It is haunted by the Moores themselves, and by the Stillinger girls. The paranormal activity is the echo of a tragedy. It's the psychic stain left behind by an event so horrific that it permanently marked a location. The children's laughter isn't the sound of a demonic entity, it's the residual energy of happy children whose lives were cut short. The feeling of dread isn't a monster in the closet, it's the palpable sense of sorrow and fear that saturates the very walls of that house. The idea that a ghost or a demon was the killer is, in a strange way, a comforting one. It's a way for our minds to process the unthinkable. The alternative is far more terrifying. The alternative is that a regular person, a neighbor, a traveling preacher, a complete stranger, a human being just like us, was capable of this level of evil. That is a deeply unsettling thought. It's easier to believe in a monster from another world than to accept the monster that can live next door or even inside ourselves. The paranormal legend of the Villisca Axe Murder House serves a purpose. It keeps the story alive. It ensures that Josiah, Sarah, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, Paul, Lena, and Ina are not forgotten. People visit the house not just for a cheap thrill, but because they are drawn to the mystery and the tragedy. They want to connect with the past, they want to understand what happened, but in seeking to understand, we've created 2 separate stories. There is the historical story, an unsolved mass murder in a small Iowa town in 1912. It's a story of failed police work, of community trauma, and of a killer who got away with it. It's a true crime mystery, and the real horror is its lack of resolution. We don't know who did it. We don't know why. That gaping hole in the narrative is what is truly haunting. And then there is the paranormal story, a haunted house where spirits of murdered children still play and cry. It's a story of ghosts and shadow people, of EVPs and self-inflicted wounds. This story is dramatic and frightening, but it also offers a kind of strange comfort. It suggests that something of the victims remains, that they are still there in some form. The mistake is to confuse the 2 stories. A ghost did not kill the Moore family. A man did. A man with a name and a face. A man who lived and breathed and walked out of that house and was never held accountable for what he did. He might have been a business rival, a crazed preacher, or a wandering serial killer. We will likely never know for certainty. That is the real tragedy of Villisca. The ghosts of the Villisca house are not the culprits. They are the victims. The sounds and shadows people report are not the evidence of the killer, but the endless echo of the crime. The house is a monument to an injustice. The true horror of Villisca isn't a ghost with an axe. It's the knowledge that a human being did this, and that the only thing left behind was a mystery that has now, over a century later, been completely overshadowed by a ghost story. The search for a phantom has replaced the search for a man, and maybe, in the end, that's what the real killer would have wanted. To become a ghost himself, lost to history, while his victims remain trapped in the story of their own deaths forever.